CCCR, or Centre for Creative and Cultural Research, investigates the ancient, innovative relationship between social culture and creative production. Based in the Faculty of Arts and Design at the University of Canberra, we generate scholarship and artwork in a wide array of humanities, social science, applied and creative disciplines. You are listening to a fresh presentation from the CCCR's Culture and Creativity Seminar Series. To learn more about the Centre's work, please follow the links in the program notes. This podcast was recorded on the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. Hi everybody, my name is Paul McGee. I'm the Director of the Centre for Creative and Cultural Research here in the Faculty of Arts and Design. I want to start by acknowledging that we are here on the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. I pay my respects to all First Nations people present and all First Nations people in the past as well. Now today we have a really special event for you. I'm totally delighted. It's what is about to unfold. I'm just going to start by introducing our three speakers and then they will take it away. So first up to speak will be Professor Damith Herath. Damith is a roboticist and Professor of Robotics and Art at the University of Canberra, where he leads the Collaborative Robotics Lab. With over 20 years of experience in multidisciplinary and translational robotics research, he's an award-winning entrepreneur who founded Australia's first collaborative robotics startup. His work explores the intersection of robotics and art, including pioneering collaborations with renowned artists like Stellark. As lead editor of Robots and Art, Exploring an Unlikely Symbiosis, he's made significant contributions to human-robot interaction across diverse domains, merging technical innovation with artistic exploration. Now, after Damith talks, you're going to hear from Maleen and Piumi, both together, yeah? So Maleen Jayasuriya is a lecturer in robotics at the University of Canberra, specialising in human-robot interaction. With a PhD from UTS, his research spans robot perception, deep learning and collaborative robotics. Maleen is passionate about integrating arts with technology, drawing from his experiences in theatre, filmmaking, animation and game development. At the Collaborative Robotics Lab, he explores the intersection of robotics, explainable AI, psychology and art, bringing a unique interdisciplinary perspective to robotics research. And Piumi Wijesundara, who is a theatre artist specialising in devised theatre and physical performance. Piumi holds an MA in theatre directing from East 15 Acting School in the UK and trained in biomechanics at the Russian Institute of Theatre Arts. Currently Public Programs Director at CMAG, she was previously a Program Manager at NIDA and served as Co-Artistic Director of Stages Theatre Group Sri Lanka. Piumi is also a visiting lecturer of Applied Theory at the Faculty of Arts, University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. Her directorial works include Awa Kawagia and Ovary Acting, O-V-A-R-Y, with international directing acting credits spanning Australia, Sri Lanka, UK and Rwanda. Please join me in welcoming the three speakers.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for coming and especially for CCR for organizing this. I feel a bit overwhelmed. Like, I don't know if I can live up to all the accolades, but let me try. What I might do is actually, the main act is the RAPP Lab. I'll set up a little I'll share a couple of anecdotes working with Stellark and how all this sort of came about in the last 20 odd years. I would also like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal peoples where we gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. All right, so I assume that most of you are familiar with Stellark. So I met Stellark around 2008, so about 3 years after the definitive monograph came out. from MIT Press. Stellac is obviously one of the most celebrated performance artists in the world, and one of the fantastic post-humanists, as well as a humanist. When I met him, actually, I was a naive PhD, just out of my first postdoc stint, and looking for some work in robotics. So I had no idea about robotic art, and I did not know who Stellac is. And that actually worked well for me, because otherwise I would have been overwhelmed talking to him. So I met this bald man. He was bald then as well. And we had a chat, one day. And as I said, Stellac, it's nice to meet you. And I've been actually working on a little project around sound localization. So my background is in SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping, which is about getting a robot to go from A to B. Back in the day, we didn't have Elon Musk and self-driving cars. So people didn't really think that self-driving cars was possible for another 50 to 100 years. So I was working in that sort of area, and it was purely technical work. And I was having a coffee with Stellac, and Stellac said, that's cool. I got a robot in a crater. I need somebody to help with that. And I said, oh, yeah, sure, as long as you pay me a little, because I was out of a PhD, out of work almost. So they agreed to pay me, and we started working on one of those yellow industrial robot arms. So the ones that you kind of see in industrial manufacturing settings. And I asked Stellac, so what do you want to do? And I said, I want to create a seductive robot with this. I said, Stellac, that's actually not really helping. I mean, I usually work with XYZ coordinates, and I need a bit more specific information than that to actually work on this project. But he said, Damith, just go with it and see what you can do. And that's exactly what I did. For the next, I think, 4 or 5 years, Stellac and I, with a couple of colleagues, we looked at how to make this robot seductive. So it's industrial arm with a screen mounted on the top, which displays the artist's digitized face. And with all that work, what we realized is that, even though you didn't have really an optimization algorithm per se to work with, by simply, allowing it to interact with humans without having any kind of specific intention, actually created a really, really interesting perspectives about what machines can do and what it means to interact with machines in human sense. So for the next 4 or 5 years, we developed this project, and that kind of led to really creating a new field in robotics called robotic art. So this is about now 17 years old. People have been working in robotics, people have been working in art, and people have been using robots to create art and to kind of facilitate artistic expressions. But as a field, as a way exploring this from a research perspective, that sort of started with this humble encounter with Stellac. And over the last 15 years, we have held numerous robotic art conferences, journals, books, and in fact, now there's so many interesting, ways you can explore this field, thanks to that one encounter with Stellac number of years. And what I find robotic art interesting is that it actually provides a non-judgmental context to study human-machine interaction, which is kind of what we do quite a lot in the Collaborative Robotics Lab. So over the last number of years, we have been exploring how we can create these kinds of interactions, and especially with non-humanoid type robots. So this is one such example. And it led to us exploring, how can we create interesting interactions with ordinary people, and a chance encounter again with Vicky Van Hout. She's a indigenous choreographer and artist in Sydney. Has done some fantastic work, and she was quite open to exploring this idea of how we can engage with robots. So we held this first, what we could call the RAPP Lab, the workshop between the artists, the engineers, and the machines to see if we can come up with some new, more movement paradigms for choreography. Over a day, she and another choreographer actually interacted with this robot, the Baxter you see here. Initially very cautious, very robot-like movements, but towards the end of the day, Vicky actually said to me, Damith, I think we got a really intimate relationship with this robot now. So that was kind of like an aha moment for us, to kind of really to see if we can structure this in a meaningful way that we can invite artists to engineering labs to collaborate, to explore. So we have held a couple of RAPP labs over the years, robots, art people, and performance labs. These are really unique artist residencies that offers not just a place, but a context to explore machine-human relationships and collaborations. So what you're going to see today is actually the third installment of that with Piumi and Maleen. So what I've learned over that period of time, just if I could sum it in a couple of points about these kinds of really extreme interdisciplinary research, it's useful to have very shared goals. Now, one of the things that happened over that period is actually I veered quite off from where I started from my PhD journey. I no longer actually publish in simultaneous localization mapping. Do I regret it? Maybe I could have made some money because it's quite an interesting area to work in from an industry perspective. But for younger researchers, early career researchers, kind of doubling in these kinds of intersections, one of the things I want to share is that you have to have shared goals, because without that, especially for the engineering side of the team, it becomes just a development project and not necessarily an outcome per se. So it's important to have that sort of shared individual goals. The second one is about trust. This kind of work really requires a lot of trust because you're working at the extremities of disciplines and your language is different. You don't know, what the actual outcomes might be. And even the kind of metrics that you're measured against are different. So it's really important to have that trust. And the third one is the mutual respect. There's no one discipline that's better than the other. I know that from the engineering perspective, we engineers think we are the best, which is not necessarily the case. You had some humbling experiences on that. So these are some of the insights that I gleaned and I would like to kind of share and leave with you. All this kind of led me to quickly to sum up, to come to UC about 7-8 years ago and set up Collaborative Robotics Lab. So this is kind of embodying all that ethos of working at the extremes of the disciplines. This is a slide that we knocked up for something else. So just to kind of quickly put some numbers and metrics for senior executives. We have about 16 to 18 PhDs working across disciplines from art to robotics to psychology. We have a fully equipped lab, was mostly funded by industry. So we have about, I think, now I think we have about close to $2 million worth of equipment that are really industry funded that our research students are actually using. We have close to 18 staff from all the faculties collaborating on different aspects of these projects. So I'm really grateful for that. So this is just a quick snapshot of some of the things you do. As you can see, we do really different things from really purely technical to sort of psychological, sociological, and the creative arts as well. So I'll probably let these guys take over and maybe we can, I can share a couple of anecdotes later as well if you're interested. Thank you.
Cool. Hi, I'm Maleen. This is Piumi. How's everyone doing? Good. Awesome. Cool. So thanks, Damith. I think most everything you're going to see here today is a result of all the pioneering work that Damith has done over the last few years, which has allowed us to actually kind of explore these ideas as a legitimate form of research. I'm sure Damith has a lot of stories about how difficult it was 10 years ago, but for me to jump in and do a lot of engineering and art has been so much more easier because of the pioneering work that Damith has done. So thank you for that intro. So we are here today to present some preliminary work based on a workshop we did about a month ago. So it's like fresh out of the oven, right? It's been a very short period of time to put together what you're going to see here today. But we're really like super excited to share this initial work with you, what the process was like and what we learned from it. And this, as Damith mentioned, was part of the Robotics, Art, Performance, and People Lab that Damith initiated a couple of years ago. So this is the third iteration of it. So what we're going to cover today is, all right, so we're going to first do a brief set of introductions, and then we're going to jump into a little bit of background of robots in theater and performance art. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the research questions that we were interested in and why we kind of initiated this whole process. And then Piumi is going to talk a little bit about what the workshop structure was like. And then we're going to meet the cobot, the robot at the center of all of this nonsense. And then Piumi is also going to talk about some of the theatrical, physical theater methodologies that she used in this process, like Meyerhold's biomechanics and Tréteau theater. Don't worry, Piumi is going to explain what all of those mean. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we learned from this whole process. And then we're going to end with some of the output. We're going to show some of the footage that we captured at the end of this whole workshop process. So I'll hand it over to Piumi to talk a little bit about her background.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here. Thank you, CCCR, for having us. So just to give some context to our work, I thought I'll talk a little bit about the background of where I come from. So I'm a theater director, actor, writer, and producer. And these are all really fancy ways of saying I'm a grown-ass human adult who's just playing around and doing make-believe on stage, and people come to watch me, which is fantastic. But innately, I really believe that we are all storytellers, no matter what field we come from. And for me, storytelling is really about like, how do we drive socio-political change? And that's the kind of work I've been doing back home in Sri Lanka with the company that I work with, Stages Theatre Group, where we did a lot of socio-politically conscious, devised physical theatre work, kind of tackling a lot of the historical violence, the kind of taboo topics that we don't talk about in our history books, the kind of topics we really don't talk about out in the open in society. We try to bring it to a stage and then create a dialogue with our audiences. And then this kind of work, I also tried to drive through and continue here in Australia. And I've had the privilege of working with some incredible companies. So this was just a still from a recent production that I was in last year called Ruins, which is about second-generation migrants here in Australia, which is also being staged this year in Sydney at the Seymour Centre. So if any of you are around, please do come by. And so in addition to this, I'm also a passionate theatre educator, so I do a lot of actor training. I train a lot of professional young actors who are, budding theatre makers, as well as I have a real passion for working with children and young people, because I believe that they are the next generation of conscientious storytellers of our future. So back home in Sri Lanka, I did a lot of work with schools, with children and young people from vulnerable communities, such as children in state custody, refugee young people. And some of the productions I did, like Overreacting, was talking about busting the myths and taboos of female menstruation in Sri Lanka. And we also did a lot of regional work, bringing theatre and drama educations to rural schools. And this kind of education and bringing theatre education to young people is something I strive to continue here in Australia as well. So I've had the privilege of doing that at places like NIDA Open. And here in Canberra, I work at the Canberra Youth Theatre as well. So another thing in Sri Lanka is the word artist and activist is synonymous, because we've had a 30-year political ethnic conflict. And we come from a place where we don't have state-supported theatre industry per se, but there is a thriving and bustling, incredible theatre scene that's built on the backs of like the blood, sweat, and tears of independent artists who strive to make theatre sustainable for young people. They tell stories that the state then, sometimes censors, but we have these incredible artists who are constantly trying every day to keep theatre and storytelling alive for meaningful, impactful change. So this was also another instance where I've seen and have lived experience of the power of theatre to bring impactful, meaningful political change. I was part of the Artists of the People's Movement, which was a collective of artists throughout the island who came together to do performance art protests during the 2022 Sri Lankan political and economic crisis, which was a people's revolt that actually ousted our former corrupt government. So I've really seen the power of theatre to bring about meaningful, impactful change just by storytelling and just, doing make-believe out on the streets. So I tried to continue this kind of artist advocacy and activism here in Australia as well. So I've had the privilege to work with Diversity Arts Australia, where I'm one of the arts leaders now, trying to work on focusing on emerging artists who are from migrant backgrounds and how they establish themselves as artists here in Australia, which is my story as well. So that's just a little bit of background of where I came from, and over to Maleen.
Thanks, Piumi. So my background is in robotics. So I worked a lot in the area of robot perception and navigation, basically teaching robots how to see and understand the world around them. And so this was specifically around using robots for medicine, for mobility and helping people with difficulties in mobility. I've also done projects around helping the Sri Lankan government identify elephants, because it's a huge problem. Trains crash into them, it's horrific. And some of the work we've done is now actually being deployed by the Sri Lankan Railway Department. I've also done quite a bit of engineering work for social good. This is some work that I did with some friends of ours called the ARCA initiative around bringing affordable sanitary pad production machines to rural areas in Sri Lanka. But these days, I work in human-robot interaction. That's studying how humans and robots work together. Some of my previous work looked at human-robot interaction in construction sites. But the most exciting part was the opportunity to join the Collaborative Robotics Lab, where we are doing really fun work in looking at the intersection of psychology and robotics, and also the opportunity to work on robotics and art. Because, and that's exciting, because I also have a background in theater. I've been directing quite a bit of theater over the years. I also do quite a bit of film, dabbled in a bit of animation, basically anything that allows me to tell stories. And the cool thing is, once Piumi and I have also worked together over the last 10 years on multiple projects. And one of the projects that we worked on was around making PSAs, public service announcement videos, with kids about digital addiction, cyberbullying, things like that. We've also done short films with asylum seekers and kids, and blending animation and film. But we've also, and this is now actually getting into the meat of our presentation, but we thought we'd just set up some context of where we come from. We also work together on a lot of physical theater. So the last production we did in Sri Lanka was just before we left, like 2 years ago, was on migration in Sri Lanka, the comings and goings of people. And these are some stills, and we used, because of Piumi's strong background in physical theater, it was a large ensemble of young actors in Sri Lanka that we used to kind of put this production together. And basically, that's what brought us here today. And as I mentioned, we have quite a passion when it comes to physical theater. And out of all the mediums we worked in, we found it really rewarding, especially this idea of devised physical theater, which is this co-creative act that you do with a large group of people. So it's really joyous. It's a lot of fun. You get to really, instead of one person, writing a script and then dictating to everyone else what the production is going to be like, it's this sort of co-created form of theater that's a lot of fun. So as I mentioned, so devised theater is this sort of co-creative process. The other fun part about it is that it's inherently experimental. It's inherently playful. Most of how the workshopping happens is through games and experimentation, which is a lot of fun. And then obviously the physical part of it is when you use your body to tell stories, right? You can do physical theater without your body, but devised physical theater is all about using movement and using your body to tell stories. And so that's what got us interested in. So once we joined the collaborative robotics lab and saw the kind of work Damith was doing, the obvious question was, can we do this with robots? Can we do this kind of devised theater where we co-create together with the robot? And can we do this through physical movement? So I'll hand it over to Piumi now to talk a little bit about background of robotics and performance art.
So something cool we discovered, and I don't know if any of you know it. Do you know how where the word robot was coined? Russia, yes.
Check.
Yes, that's correct. Correct now. So as I said, we are inherently storytellers, and it's quite crazy, but the word robot was actually coined in theater. So it was coined from the Slavic word robot, which was in Karel Čapek's play RUR, Russell's Universal Robots. So the word actually meant work and forced labor. So the word robot itself came from theater, and like the story was actually about people's anxieties about the future and robotics and automation. And then fast forward to, a century later, in the 1990s, we now see this incredible canon emerging of robotics, like human robotic ensembles in theater and performance art. So these are just a couple of highlights just to show you the kind of work that's been done around the world. So Damith talked about the incredible work they did with Stelarc. So this is the Stelarc's articulated head that Damith and Stelarc worked on. And then we have a lot of other productions that have emerged. For example, this was another fascinating production we found that happened in Montreal called Inferno, where they strapped on robotic exoskeletons onto an audience and they improvised with it. And since then, we've seen robotic arts emerge in international theater festivals and going right up to IEEE, the conference as well, where they now have robotic arts as, a section of like research and presentation as well, which is quite fascinating. So that's just to give you an overview of where we are headed with this new canon of robotic arts performance. But when we came into it, something that we saw is there wasn't as much work being done in human robot ensemble performance that was focusing on devised physical theater. So that was one area we thought we'd like to explore. Another thing we saw was that the narratives emerging out of human robot performances were largely technocentric, and it was mostly largely about, anxieties about the future and AI and automation. And then we were curious, can we use human robot ensembles to tell your everyday stories? Can we use it to tell socio-politically conscious stories, marginalized narratives, diverse narratives that were about issues of the developing world or any other marginalized narratives that we can try and bring up with this form? So that was one of the other curiosities we had, which brings me to our research questions that we were interested in exploring, that Maleen will take you through.
Yeah, so these are the big questions. So we had like 4 big questions. The first is, one of the coolest things about working with an ensemble of people usually is that moment in devised physical theater where everything just clicks. If any of you have seen some really good physical theater work, when the whole performance gets elevated, when there's this sort of unspoken intuitive relationship that all the people on stage have. And the sort of technical applied theater word for this is complicity. Which doesn't mean everyone's complicit in some sort of horrible act, but it's more of this sort of moment-to-moment attenuation that you have with the fellow actor that you have on stage. So we were curious on whether this sort of complicity could be formed between an ensemble of people and having a robot there, and how would this sort of complicity be formed between that group, and how could we use that to tell stories in a devised physical theater context? The second question that we had was, when you take a typical robot, there's quite a bit of limitations. There's a lot happening in pop culture where we see all these like crazy robots, but real robots are very limited and they're kind of dumb, right? So we wanted to see if we can use the inherent limitations and constraints that the robot has and flip them and try to use these as creative affordances. So for example, a typical robot has a limited workspace that it works in, right? It's a very constrained workspace. The second thing we were looking at is the fact that most of the movements of robots at the moment are very mechanical, right? And so can we use that in our storytelling, right? And try to create a common vocabulary between people who are much more fluid and gangly, right? And these mechanical movements. And can we form some sort of common movement vocabulary that creates an aesthetic that would be useful in storytelling? So here we looked at particularly Tréteau theater and Meyerhold's biomechanics techniques, which Piumi is going to talk about later, as a means to try to create that common vocabulary. So that was the second question. And the third is, whenever we think about robot, what words pop into your mind, right? We all come with certain biases. We all come with stereotypical roles that we put onto a robot. So we wanted to actually just break apart that and explore the gamut of different potential roles the robot could play could it be a fellow actor? Could it be a prop? How would we cast it? Is it a villain? Is it a friend? Right? So we wanted to sort of break away the boundaries and explore all of it, right? And then the final question that we had, as Piumi mentioned, most of the narratives that come out of technological art is very sort of techno-futurist, very Western bent. And so we thought, can we explore ideas around underrepresented socio-political or cultural themes? And because this is sort of an emerging space in the arts in general is kind of dominated by those kind of narratives. So we wanted to see if we could center some of these underrepresented narratives in this space. So these are the big questions that we were looking at.
Then to move to our workshop structure. So we started out with an open call for some movement artists. So to be honest, we are new to Canberra, and this was the underlying intention of this was so that we could actually meet some cool artists in Canberra, which we did. So sorry, Damith. But so thick. And so we had an open call for movement artists from any background here in Canberra, and we had some wonderful responses. And out of 15 responses that we selected 15 movement artists, 10 movement artists for our workshop. And these artists came from diverse cultural backgrounds as well as diverse arts practices and movement practices, which was actually incredible because we had artists who were recent immigrants. We had artists who were coming from puppetry backgrounds, contemporary dance, yoga instructors, martial artists, artists who are advocates for disability arts. And we had this incredibly diverse group of artists who each brought individual strengths. And for us, it was great to then see, like, can we bring all these artists with these different movement vocabularies, and can we see if we can bring them to one movement vocabulary to create this human robot ensemble? And additionally, how do we use their unique strengths and skills to make it even more vibrant for our storytellings? So in the workshop, we started with day one it was a 2-day workshop. It was like a 2-day intensive, trying to pack as much as we can in the 2 days. So the first day was also about creating, like even Damith talked about, there's a lot of trust that you need to build. Even generally as actors, there's a lot of trust exercises we do when it's a group of new actors working together with their bodies. So we had to do some trust exercises and then establish safety and trust with the robot that we were working with. And then day one was also about introducing the theater techniques that we were interested in exploring, which was Meyerhold's biomechanics. And then just having, mainly we just want to have a curious sense of play, because theater is all about playing, curiosity, exploration, and you find your best work in making mistakes and just creative, like fun exploration and collaboration. So that was what we really wanted to be the foundation of our workshop. And then in day two, we advanced, because we had such a group of artists with such an eclectic palette of movement, they actually progressed quite fast. So we were able to move on to Tréteau theater techniques and then do some creative brainstorming and then devise with our narrative anchor that we chose, which was fast fashion. And
awesome. So that brings us to meeting our robot, right? So this is what we call a collaborative robot. And the reason why we picked a collaborative robot is because these robots are meant to work with people So for the longest time, we've had robots stuck in factories with cages around them because they were really dangerous. They could kill you, right? So obviously we didn't want to kill these artists who we just met. We didn't want to maim them or damage them in any way. Like Piumi said, we were here just to make friends, right? So we picked this collaborative robot, and the feature that makes it safe is even if it hits you, it knows that it's collided with something and it automatically stops. It's also so it's got a lot of safety features built in, which means that we can physically sort of collaborate with it very closely. Another reason why we picked this is because it's deliberately non-humanoid, right? Because again, we wanted to explore the gamut of roles that this robot could take and what it could mean on stage for storytelling. And we felt that, and we do have quite a few humanoid shaped robots in our lab, but we deliberately picked something that's not, because the moment it's humanoid, it comes with a lot of preconceived notions, right? For example, one of the robots that we have, Pepper, is very childlike, right? And that already, casts a robot in a certain way, whereas this is a more abstract form that we can really play with and experiment and see what sort of ideas that can come out of it. So even though these are safe robots, again, we just needed to make extra safe. So we started off, as Piumi said, with a lot of building trust with the robot, and we gave all our artists like 10 commandments of safety when working with the robot. So in terms of movement, there were mainly two main ways that the artists kind of moved with the robot. And the first is this pre-programmed movement. And for this, the artist would tell the engineer basically some sort of start pose, start configuration that you see here, and then some sort of end configuration that you'll see in a moment, right? And then how fast you want to move between these two poses. And once you reach the final pose, how long you want to kind of wait at that pose, right? So this is sort of a pre-program mode that was really useful for us to sort of pre-program exact trajectories. It was really good for image making, and it's also repeatable, right? So that was one mode that we played around with the robot. So it's like point A to point B is what we call the free drive mode, which is a lot of fun. So there's this mode where you can lower the torque that's in the joints of the robot, which allows the artist to physically grab the robot and move it around and physically interact with the robot. And so the artists really get to sort of sculpt the physical movement, share weight with the robot, right? And really build this sort of complicity that we really cared about in this process. So at that initial stage of building the trust, we just allowed the artist to play with the robot in this mode. So each artist got some time to actually just really feel the robot, really connect with it. Because when we're dealing with human ensembles, forget the robot, it takes usually weeks and months of working with each other, really to understand each other's bodies, how each other move, and getting to know them. And we had 2 days to build that with the robot, right? So we just chucked them in there, and it was a lot of fun because the artists were like really curious, and they jumped into it without any hesitation and pushed the robots to limits that I've never seen it being pushed. So it was a lot of fun. So that's a little bit about the robot, and now Piumi will talk about the physical theater techniques.
So as Maleen explained, like the robot comes with its own features of movements. And one of the limitations that we saw was that the robot's movements were very mechanical, whereas now we had this human ensemble that was more fluid and had so many different pathways of motions and means to move. So then we looked at how do we bridge this gap. And this is where Meyerhold's biomechanics, which is a system of actor training that was started in Russia, came into play. So just to give you a little bit of context about Meyerhold's biomechanics, I'm sure you've all heard of Stanislavski, who is his more famous predecessor and teacher, who's done, emotional and psychological realism in acting. All Hollywood talks about method acting. That's Stanislavski. So Meyerhold was Stanislavski's student who moved away from this emotional realism and this psychological kind of acting to what he called gestural engineering. Ta-da! So he really looked at how can we use the mechanics of our body and create ensembles that can work with precision How can we create repeatable movements just by using the mechanics of our body? And also he moved into a more abstract kind of movement, because he was also influenced by constructivism and futurism from Italy. So even when you look at his sets, they were more like scaffolding. So if you see a lot of theater scaffolding, like scaffolding in theater, he was the one who introduced that as set for theater as well, because he was like, we know there's a fourth wall. We know we are playing make-believe as adults. The audience knows it, so why don't we just lean into it? So he was really looking at, can we make the audience believe this scaffolding is a palace? Can we make the audience believe that even if I'm doing this action, like this is telling you a huge, big story, and you each have your different narratives that you can put on top of this. So this was the style of acting he was interested in. And this style of acting particularly had all these elements of like I said, the mechanical movement. Then there's these ideas of precision, repeatability that we thought worked really well with the movement vocabulary of the robot. So we focused on Meyerhold's 4 biomechanical principles, which were the fundamental things we worked with. So for example, Maleen talked about like how the robot plans like motion. So there's a clear stop, there's a motion, there's a speed, and then there's a clear stop. So this is kind of like pre-programming our actors. So we worked with the 4 principles, with the first one, which is called odkaz in Russian. It's about how you prepare your body for the motion that you're about to plan. So it's like you're planning your motion pathway. And then posil, which is all about like executing the mechanical abilities of your entire body to achieve that movement that you need. And then you have number 3, which is stoika, which is about tension. How do you control the different tension? How do you transfer tension in your body to achieve a certain momentum and gain that control that you need of your body? And finally, tomos, which is about how do you slow down to stop? So like if your pathway is from here to there, I can't go crash into the wall. So how do I really anticipate that movement and bring my body to a controlled stop? And biomechanics also has a lot of exercises that you do from head to toe to gain control of your different body parts. There's a lot of coordination, strength, flexibility, and movement training that you do. So just to give you an example, I'm going to ask all of you to do a very simple exercise. So if you can put your arms out, really simple. We're going to work with this joint, which is our wrist, and see how it moves. So we're all going to move our arms just inside. Great. Inside, inside, and stop. Now we're going to take it outside, outside, stop. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a coordination exercise. One arm is going to go inside. The other one's going to go outside. Inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside, and stop. Thank you. So biomechanics is all about kind of this, and you see like it feels simple, but there's a lot of control that you need to achieve that. There's a lot of preparation, control, and thinking. So actors do extensive, rigorous training like this from head to toe, and then they work with each other and try to achieve this sense of control where they can have a level of precision and specificity in their movements, which we try to apply in our storytelling. And over to Maleen.
Yeah, and so after the first day, after they survived Piumi's coordination exercises, and here's some video of that. We were looking, we also did some exercises. So once they survived Piumi's coordination exercises, we were looking at storytelling and asking that question of what sort of roles robot could actually play. And we were interested in process, but at the same time, for the process to work, we needed some sort of narrative anchors for us to sort of explore, because it was all about storytelling, right? As I mentioned, we were more interested in process, but we needed these anchors as foundations for us to explore the process. So as we kind of alluded at the start, as these narrative anchors, we wanted something meaningful that we cared about, right? And which is why we looked at these underrepresented sort of cultural and socio-political themes. So the first thing that we looked at sort of as a narrative anchor was the myth of Kali. And the story goes that basically there was this demon attacking some villagers. And then we had this goddess Durga who saw the damage that this demon was inflicting. So she wanted to save the people. She started battling this demon. But she realized the moment she attacked this demon, it multiplied and caused more harm. So as a means to sort of deal with this, Durga has sort of a duality to her. She has another form named Kali. So she allows Kali, which is much more vengeful and angry, to take over. And then Kali drinks the blood of this demon, and she turns into a demon herself, vanquishes the demon, but then goes on her own rampage because of all that rage and anger. And we thought this would be a really good allegory for the kind of technological issues that we see today, because you have all these tech bros, and even if we give them a very charitable sort of interpretation for what they're doing, which is, hey, I'm doing all of this technology to help society, there's a lot of unintentional consequences caused by that, because, you know, like we've seen that with social media algorithms. We're probably going to see that with AI and all sorts of other technology. So we thought this would be a nice allegory to kind of talk about that using Hindu mythology. The second narrative anchor that we wanted to use was around fast fashion and the garment industry, because again, it's very close to us at home in Sri Lanka and a lot of developing countries, where a lot of people that we know personally are exploited by this industry. We are also the consumers of this industry. It also causes a lot of sustainability issues, and we thought this is also another meaningful thing we can talk about, especially about how labor is treated in these spaces, almost as if these people are treated like robots. And we thought, you know, this would be an interesting anchor for us to explore these ideas. So we had these sort of brainstorming sessions, and we looked at the whole gamut of, you know, everything from production to the consumption. And we had these really interesting brainstorming sessions with the artists about how the robot could be cast in these roles when we're trying to tell these stories. And we got some really exciting ideas from all the artists. Cool. And I will hand it over to Piumi.
And so the second day, as I said, because we had such a diverse range of artists with such diverse movement practices, they actually breezed through the first day, and we could achieve a sense of ensemble, which was incredible in the first day. So then we moved on to advancing it in the second day, where we explored Lecoq's Tréteau theatre. Now, another limitation of working with the cobot is, as Maleen said, it has a very limited workspace and range of movements, which means whereas then we wanted to find out how can we bridge this gap of working in this limited space. So Jacques Lecoq is a theatre practitioner from France, and he's called Tréteau theatre, where you put a bunch of actors in a constrained space, like a 1 by 2 meter platform, and you put all these bodies in space, and then you look at how do you make this spatial limitation, how do you turn it into a playlist, how can you put a bunch of people in a limited, very confined space and create epic stories out of it just with space and their bodies. And as we know, theatre is all about just putting spaces in bodies, because Peter Brook said, the person walks on an empty stage, that's theatre for you. So we explored this confined space as a creative catalyst, and working in the cobot's workspace with the 10 actors, and how do we tell stories together. Because you're in a constrained space, the actors need to find creative ways and move with the different momentums of their own bodies as well as the cobot, and find innovative ways to move and tell stories. So the autonomy of movement. And then we looked at this idea of fixed point. So a fixed point in theatre, the best way to explain it, if all of you can demonstrate to me how you open a cabinet door. Can you show me?
And back to A real quick.
Exactly. So all of you created a fixed point. So when you a fixed point is an arbitrary space that you choose to kind of interlock, and you give it weight, you give it space, and then you tell the audience, this is my fixed point, this is the handle, and I open the door. So now if I need to open it again, I can't open it here because the audience believes that it's here. This is my fixed point. So that's what a fixed point is. And in Tréteau theatre, you put a bunch of bodies in space, and you kind of have a fixed point where the actors kind of move together, but they have a fixed point where they return to do the storytelling. And then we have this idea of counterbalance. Now, if you'd like to explore this, I'd ask, you can grab the hand of someone next to you. So counterbalance is all about weight sharing in a space. So if you want, you can try this out by grabbing someone next to you. So you stand up. If you want to try it, you just stand up. So you hold them, and again, this is also about trust. So you hold them. So I don't know if you trust each other, but you'll find out. And then you slowly try and shift and balance each other's weight.
And back to A real quick.
Event's going with 3 people.
Beautiful.
So these kind of exercises, thank you. Thank you so much. So like this is not something we extensively got to do because of the limitation of time, but actors have all done this, and we really do a lot of weight and space sharing in space. So these are the kind of things we explored. And then we tried these biomechanics, Tréteau theory principles, and let the magic happen with the storytelling.
Cool. So just to kind of, we're almost at the end. So what did we learn from this whole thing? Throughout this process, we had feedback from our participants, and so we've done some preliminary analysis of the feedback that we've gotten. And the first thing we realized is that most of the participants did genuinely feel connected with the robot, built that complicity that we were really hoping would kind of come out of this. But one of the biggest limitations that we ourselves realized, and we got feedback from the artists, was the fact that if you go back to how the robot was programmed, it was all driven by the artist. The robot didn't really have its own agency or intelligence. So that was clearly sort of a limiting factor on how connected you can feel and treat that robot as another sort of member of the ensemble when it really doesn't have any agency. So that's something we want to explore next. Could we use AI to give it some form of agency where it actually interacts with it, where we don't have to pre-program it? Second, we also got a lot of feedback about the biomechanics and Tréteau theater techniques that Piumi was talking about, and that how valuable of a common vocabulary it was to tell these stories. Limitation was, as Piumi mentioned, we needed more time. Usually, any of these training techniques take months to kind of build up, but there was definitely potential there to explore more. And there are also these other physical theater vocabularies like Suzuki, circus, commedia dell'arte kind of forms of interaction. So these are all limitations. Like we've only explored 2 of these ideas. Third, the participants also told us that they saw the robot in all these different forms, from like prop to fellow actor to object, and some even thought that it felt like an extension of themselves, which was really interesting. A few of the participants, one in particular, did not feel any of that, and I'll keep it anonymized, but they felt like it was just a prop, it was just an object, and they couldn't get past that fact, which was interesting. But they still found a way to kind of work with it in the ensemble. In terms of the narrative anchors, which was the 4th big question that we had, it provided meaningful context for us to explore these ideas, and we ended up with 2 devised pieces, which we're going to show to you today. But in terms of limitations, I think there remains a lot of scope to integrate deeper cultural narratives and explore deeper ideas. These were just 2 basic things that we ran with. Some of the feedback that we got was the garment factory, the fast fashion theme in particular, was already very industrial. So it already casted the robot in certain ways, although we tried to break that during the devising process. So these are some of the things we learned. So to wrap things up, next slide. Here are the pieces that we did.
Mushroom clouds of ash and dust vanquishing villages, corroding dreams, trampling trust, cutting through skin like rope that rips through crimson veins as they hold on too tight. Hands heavy with hope. To let go is to lose life itself. Raktabija, the red-drenched demon, envelops, engulfs, encroaches on all living light. Durga, she sees this strife. Children crushed under rubble, villages violently aflame, souls smothering under the demon's footfall, crushing bone to dust. Mother warrior unleashes ancient steel, strikes with divine, unforgiving fury to shield her people, to shelter the innocent, to become a fortress for the defenseless and small. Only to witness with widening eyes each crimson droplet birthing carbon copy demons upon the soil, multiplying madness like a fevered plague, like cells dividing, unchecked, Unstoppable, red pools becoming ruthless armies, each wound a womb of war, spilling, spreading, spawning, no corner left untouched by crimson tide of terror. She must transform. To quell a demon she must become. Kali Ma emerges from Durga's brow, salvation's darkness, vengeance embodied. She extends her tongue to lick clean every drop of dire blood, to prevent the proliferating armies of relentless Rakta Bijas. To save is to slaughter, to protect is to punish. She lashes out and breaks his neck. She licks it clean in rage, in righteous fury. She dances upon corpses, friend and foe alike, blowing up the ashen dust, vanquishing villages. Children who once reached for her protection now hide from her terrible gaze. Her mercy transformed to merciless might, corroding dreams, trampling trust, blind to her own destruction, in her bid to save a terrifying trail of terror. The consequences of power, unchecked by wisdom. The path to suffering, paved with good intentions.
And so that was the piece about Kali, and then we have the second piece, which is the fast fashion one. Yeah, so all of this could not have been possible with some incredible help that we had. We actually shot these in this theater itself. So just quickly, just 1 to 2 minutes, just to really acknowledge the people behind all of this. With Jen was the narrative voice of our piece, Cardi. So thank you so much, Jen, for jumping on board and just helping us out. And we had Dilruk, who did the music for the first piece. He composed the music, he played it and helped us out with that. We had, you want to say a little bit about Vaidehi?
Yeah, Vaidehi is a Bharatanatyam dancer, and she just came in as to consult on some gestures and help us out.
Yeah, especially about the movements in Kali that you saw drew from Bharatanatyam. We also had Maleen Jayasuriya, who was one of our workshop artists, who also did the music for the fast fashion piece, which was incredible. And of course, Damith, without Damith, you know, like none of this would be possible. We wouldn't get to play around and have fun in this kind of safe kind of environment. So thank you, Damith, so much. It was been awesome. If you want to know more about the collaborative robotics lab and the kind of work that we do, including the arts as well as some of the technical work, you can scan this QR code, which takes you to our website. And of course, to kind of end everything, these are the wonderful artists that we had at our workshop. Some of them are here today. So and also the crew, we had our PhD students jumping in to really help us out. So if all of you could maybe rise so that we could all acknowledge the hard work.
We've got Molly and Mia and Fee here in the audience with us, and Denny. So
and also our crew. Thank you so much, guys. It really takes a village. It takes a lot of people and a lot of effort to do this. And so we feel nothing but gratitude and to work with all of you. And like we said, process is what matters to us the most, and the process has been just amazing. So thank you so much.
Even the creative, like both creative outputs were devised together with this whole group. So like it was truly devised organically with everybody here contributing very generously. So we are really grateful for the incredible artists we met in our process.
Yeah. And I guess that wraps it up. Thanks so much. I think we are a couple of minutes over. But
thank you so much.
Thanks so much, guys. That was really wild. Just a fantastic tour of an amazing set of projects and ideas. So I'm going to ask our 3 presenters to come up on stage, and I will call for any questions or comments. Alison.
We also have some of our actors in the audience if you have questions for the ensemble as well.
Thank you. That was really amazing. Lots of fun. And I was really interested in what you'd said about in the end bit where it's the limitations that people saw in what the robot could do, but also going back to your talk about robots having sort of limited casting roles. And it really occurred to me that because you've got one robot there and your aim is to understand interactions with the robot, you're sort of inadvertently foregrounding it almost like a diva. It is that one presence that nobody forgets about. And I think a lot of collaboration sort of develops in those unintentional spaces when you forget about something. So I wondered what you felt about that.
Actors to respond to that with your experience?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that a bit. There was reference to some of us feeling very connected with the robot. I live with a neurological condition that means that, as you could see in the videos, I was moving, but now I'm in a wheelchair. And I think it was really interesting thinking about that solitariness. Also thinking now, having seen the presentation, about the role of disability in these kinds of stories and where bodies are limited. But I do tend to agree that there was also this sense that a lot of people had different ways of interacting and identifying with the robot. I think I was probably the only one in the room that understood it from a mechanical, because my body moves quite mechanically when I'm not working properly. But I think there is that very interesting idea of what is a one-on-one. What is the realness of a two-hander piece, as we say in theatre, where the limitations are explored from that perspective. But I don't know, I'm sure that many of us have many ideas.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think at this stage, we can't avoid the fact that the robot is the elephant in the room. Okay. So it does end up taking that special place. Although I think in the fast fashion piece, the first half of it, we felt that we tried to imbue it as one of the one of the other ensemble members. The second half of it was kind of central and people were kind of working on it. But the first half, if you rewatch it, it's just another actor, and that's how we wanted to cast it. But it definitely is. It's hard to miss a giant mechanical arm in a room and not give it some, But I think that's just an effect of novelty. And as we progress and explore this, it's something we can try to overcome. But I agree that it is hard. It's a hard thing to kind of work around.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly. So you're asking that a robot looks like evil, like how do we connect with?
It's
Like the main character,
it's taking the
yeah.
main character. It's the focus of everything, and everyone else.
And what you felt about, yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is that seeing that a robot as a demon or devil.
No, as in everyone was focusing too much on the robot.
Yes.
And the robot became like the main character, and all of you become like just on the side,
Whether you felt that.
Oh, okay.
They just functions, so everybody's focused on them.
So it's like accentuates the importance of the robot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think maybe that's part of our storytelling is that the robot has become like a major force in the fast industry, the fashion industry, and we have that. We want to put that to be the emphasis of our storytelling, and through the interaction with the robot, I'm not sure how about like the Phil said that because of her physical limitations, and she had a different experience with interacting with the robot, and I think everyone would have a different experience when they interact with the robot, depending on how we perceive and interpret the whole story and our own personal history. And for me personally, I experienced the trust with the robot, and also I appreciate how much we want to make this storytelling like a sort of accusation of the fashion industry and the role of the robot plays in this story.
Steve had a question.
Thank you. That was amazing. I was thinking when you were talking of a performance I saw in the early 90s, which was a French ensemble called Chaos. And they performed in a tent. They were a circus troupe, and they used huge machinery, bulldozers, forklifts, smaller machinery, chainsaws. So at the end of the performance, the whole tent was completely full of diesel fumes, and I'm sure it wouldn't be allowed to happen today. But in terms of parallels, and maybe this picks up a bit on what Alison was saying, what that kind of did was the machinery kind of dominated the humans. And I think in a way it sort of democratized the relationship between the machine and the people doing the physical circus acts. So I'm just wondering whether you might comment on what kind of parallels you might see toward the future of the kind of work you want to do in kind of decentering both the human and the machine to work more collaboratively. Thank you.
I think what's important, at least just speaking for the two of us, and I hope I'm speaking for them, is like ultimately we still care about human stories and human issues, and that's what we want to. Although we have this robot on stage and we're focusing on that, I think the underlying stories are very human. At least even with the two pieces, I would agree. Like there's varying degrees of success to that we achieved in what we set out to do at the start. But one thing that was sort of a guiding central kind of ethos that we try to follow is ultimately we're talking about very human stories. Even with the Kali piece, we're talking about, the sort of hubris of humanity, and with the fast fashion piece, it's about exploitation and consumerism and the unending sort of and part of that, I think, the machine component can add to that, and that's what we were looking at. How successful we were, I'm not really sure, but what we want to do in the future as well is to explore these human stories, although we're using these machines to kind of, because there is this tendency in technological art to veer away from it. There's a lot of just, techno-futurist kind of stories, and that's fine as well. That's totally okay. I think we need to explore all of these, but there is that vacuum of just talking about regular, just human stories and human fallibility. And I think that's what we want to progressively try to focus our work in.
Off the back of that, do you think the more humanoid embodiments might help bridge the gap between that super machine? Because what you saw, the UR10 there is like a super mechanical embodiment. Like you said, we've got our Pepper robot, which is more of a humanoid representation of a robot. So it's still quite mechanical in its movement, but bodily it looks more human. Yep. So do you think that might come close to sort of helping to bridge that gap?
That's, I think, a really, really good question. I think it's definitely something to explore. Again, I think where we came from is, if we can take this super mechanical arm and still make you feel something about the human side of things, that's like, if we can do that, then doing it with a humanoid might be even easier, right? So we wanted to take the most abstract form and see how far we can push it. Again, I'm not sure how successful we were, but that was sort of the intention.
Yeah, it was also interesting because we actually had Pepper in the room while we had the rehearsals as well. Yeah. We had like all of our actors play with it. We had Fee sing to Pepper. We had all these interactions happening with Pepper as well. But like Maleen said, I think we wanted to also set ourselves the challenge of, with Pepper being humanoid, we can already see it being cast as a person or yeah. So we wanted to set ourselves a challenge and see what we could accomplish with a more mechanical robot. Fee? Yeah.
It is something that's interesting to consider as an uncontrolled variable in the room with Pepper. Like we were in the middle of a devising on day one, and suddenly I don't know why I hadn't noticed it or whether someone thought it would be funny to turn Pepper on, but suddenly Pepper's like scanning the room like, what are you doing? What are you reading? I'm like trying to work this out and totally distracted from the task. But it's interesting because that humanoid kind of interaction, and then my choice in a break to go and sing to Pepper, it may have, from a behaviour perspective, it may have impacted the work with the non-humanoid shape. So it's also an interesting variable to perhaps explore and pull apart a bit.
I just want to add something else there, which is a very, very practical reason. The type of humanize that we have in our lab at the moment are not very dexterous, and it's not very suitable, I would say, for physical theatre. That's also just a very practical reality what we're dealing with. The really crazy humanize you're seeing come out right now are very expensive, and hopefully we'll get one, right? If Damith sells, yeah, if Damith sells a kidney, I think we can know. But yeah, but with that arm in particular, it can move in ways that are much more interesting than some of the humanize that we have, which I think is another just a practical reality.
Cool. That actually leads directly into what I wanted to ask. Both mainly from the artists in the audience that kind of like participated in this, but also you guys as well, if you want to jump in. But kind of you've clearly demonstrated that the UR10 kind of can work as an actor. From the artists kind of within the room, what critiques would you give to the UR10 as an actor? What limitations, what did you feel that like the robot really, what couldn't it do that really impacted your performance that you wish it would be developed to improve upon?
I would have really liked for it to have senses, I guess, and be able to improvise with the robot responding to my movement. Like you said, that was already a limitation, that we had to design the movements before or manually move the robot in free drive. So I think it would have been really interesting to be able to have a space between it and it mirror or fill in the negative space and be able to interact with the robot in that way, or be able to lean on the robot and then let it take us in a direction and be able to respond to it and it be the leader. that I would love to explore that in the future.
Okay. Fee, you got a comment? Great.
Just sorry, just to add to that off Mia's thing, it'd be great to have it respond to us. But as someone who has limited mobility, I wanted it to be a little bit more stable, because there was a point at which you could tip it, and it's great that it has a stop feature. But if the motion is there, and there's no point of deceleration, that's something that I think when we're working with more limited bodies, we want something that's a little bit more grounded. At one point, I put my leg out to get past something, and I had this moment of, what the fuck, how am I able to do that? Which was a different thing that I observed in the workshop. But knowing that there was also a point of balance that I was actually having to maintain so that I didn't take the robot on top of an ensemble member in that space. So.
Alex.
Okay, brilliant. I have many, many thoughts and questions which I won't go into. I want to broaden it up now, Damith, with your amazing lab, which I didn't know about. So I'm really thrilled that UC has that. Do you have ethicists working with you? I mean, I love the fact you're focused on social good, you guys. It's just brilliant. And the why you do things is for that social good and the storytelling. But ethicists, who do you have? How are you working with them? Do you plan to, et cetera, et cetera?
Thanks. Well, we had a very contentious argument the other day, but we do. I don't think we have a specific ethicist at the moment that we're working with, but obviously we work with some of the ethical guidelines on one level. But that's kind of just to kind of answer a couple of the other questions as well. The lab is about really putting a sort of a mirror to ourselves, like what we do. At the core is actually technological advancements, looking at some of the most cutting edge robotics work and trying to bring that in a commercial sense. So the lab, in fact, is actually mostly funded through industry partnerships. So there's cynic in me. Exactly. So the cynic in me says, you actually probably contradicting yourself a lot of the time. And that's kind of, I think it's a good way to have a conversation, a debate about what we do. And I think Maleen kind of alluded to, a lot of the work is actually technocentric. But the way we're trying to counter that is to actually bring these kinds of work to public discussions and to explore that. We've been having these kinds of public debates for like 15 years now. And I always see, especially in Australia, we have a very clear line. There's a I think almost a 50-50 of our general populace pro-robots, and then there's staunch anti-robots, and there's not really much more middle ground. And I think part of the problem is that we don't really have these kinds of conversations at large. So the short answer is yes, we do really want to kind of explore ethical implementations of robots, not just implementation, the whole pipelines of how we build robots, how do you bring to how do you train them, what sort of models that we use, how they are trained and things like that. So this kind of work and the kind of the collaboration and sort of at the beginning I said the trust and the kind of the respect is important. So we try to kind of inculcate that in all of our PhDs, all our researchers. So sometimes we have very heated discussions around this. Recently we're talking about running an experiment, and some of our psych colleagues is saying that, oh, you probably shouldn't be doing that in that particular context. I said, no, but how about this? So we do have these debates, at least, and all of our PhDs are aware of where they stand, and they are aware of why they're doing that, but also the question, are we doing the right thing in a sort of broader sense of goodness, not just from a technical manner, I guess. I don't know if that answered your question directly, but I think I try to sort of get at.
Thank you for that honesty. But that's stage one. Correct. In terms of having you're not ethicists yourselves, and I would advocate for you're professional and everything else that you do. You've got your professional dancers, your artists, your PhD people.
may well be a good idea to have professional ethicists.
No, it's not that we didn't want to. It's just that we didn't have the right person reaching us to. So if there's somebody putting their hand up, I mean, obviously, the whole point of talking about what we do is to invite anyone to kind of work with us, and we are always open for collaborating with the people. The only the requirement is that we should be able to enjoy mutually each other's company when we work together.
We've been humbled again and again. We are always open to collaborating with different disciplines, and we definitely just want to invite anyone who wants to collaborate to come on board. And as Damith said, we do have just that condition. You can't be an asshole. Other than that, yeah.
No, so if there's an ethicist, we would love to.
My question is sort of associated with the very first one around the way that the artists engaged with the robot. I guess I was curious because I saw that you got, feedback and comments from everybody around their experience in working with the robot. I guess I'm just, I would be interested to know whether you had any, got any feedback or did any investigation around how they experienced working with the other artists with the robot, if that makes sense. Just kind of linking it back to that idea around that co-creative theatre, and noting that obviously the co-creation is not just each individual member with the robot, but it's each individual member with the other members and the robot all at the same time. So if you have anything to talk about that.
You have questions on ensemble?
Yeah, we had a couple of questions that was about ensemble and the devising process that we got, again, some feedback that we can ask the artist to answer to as well. And the theatre techniques, the ensemble and devising process, we did have a couple of questions about what that process was like for them within this limited period as well. If anybody wants to speak to the process, yeah.
So I remember at the beginning of the workshop, and Piumi has led us to do the warm-up, all the warm-up exercise. So each individuals got connected with each other in a group. And in that connected group, Waylon connected with the robot. So it was a process of first that each human connect with each other, and then we as a whole group to interact with the robot.
Yeah, I think the first half of the first day was we didn't have anyone touch the robot. It was just everyone building ensemble, and then halfway five to start.
And to add to that is also that we learned so much in that process as well, because we've been in a regular ensemble rehearsal room or workshop where it's just the actors and we have these exercises we know work with the actors, but then it was for us also building that process, structuring it, thinking about when do we bring the robot in, when do we bring everybody in for us as well. It was such a big learning process. Also having this diverse, our artist group was also helpful. How do we then navigate creating a human robot ensemble? For us was a huge learning process.
And this was definitely just a starting point. There's a lot of mistakes from our end as well, things that we've kind of taken into account for the next iteration of all of this. So it was all in all just a really good start, and we're really excited. And I think some of the questions that came from today, definitely there was a lot to think about, kind of broadening our investigations.
And if I could just add one, there's another group that participated in all this, is the engineers. And usually, I mean, they tend to be at the background, but for this process to be successful, actually, that's another component that's quite important. We did a piece sometime back with a Canadian artist called RNG, and the engineers were actually part of the performance through vicariously operating the systems that the performer interacted with. So the engineers had to become artists because they were live controlling the robot and performing and improvising with the artist. So it was actually really fun and nerve-wracking experience. So I think that there's another group that sort of come to this ensemble, whether you've seen it or not. So that's quite an interesting dynamic with this particular type of work as well.
Yeah, look, I think Piumi hit it on the head in that we didn't have enough time. Some of us in the room, there were actually 3 of us in the room in the first iteration of the lab that actually have worked with Rebus Theatre, and Rebus in Canberra is probably the only place that does a lot of very physical movement space work, so playback actors, working in image theatre, those things. And I think that there, for me as one of those members at Rebus, it was clearer that we were getting it, but not every one of us had the preconceived ideas of what we were working with. So I think the thing that we're hoping is that there'll be more funding and that we can do this more extensively and that we can take the time with it so that the group really does move as one. But I think one of the most beautiful things was seeing some of the engineers just dropping into the lab and playing with us for a couple of hours as well. And to have an entire ensemble that knows it's that moment. What was that moment that we debunked the word? The moment the ensemble moves together. Yeah. It was there briefly, but it's something that you have to build over time, and that comes through the trust and it comes through learning the limitations of the other person. Meisner is another Russian actor that came out of Stanislavski, and for me, I'd love to see more of harder to deal with a robot because it won't necessarily respond to you, but that sense of that immediacy of connection.
Just to add on a hopeful note, I think all of what you saw today was done on like zero budget. Like we had no funding, but purely from the generosity of all the people involved, starting from our lab and Damith all the way down to our PhD students and obviously artists just dedicating their time. So if anyone wants to fund us, give us a call. But on a more serious note, I think like all the questions that were brought up today, things we want to keep exploring, especially giving the robot some agency is like the next step. Like if you can give it sort of, like Mia said, like an ability to interact rather than us pre-programming, that'll be awesome. But the work that you saw today has been sort of foundational for us to now show other people and see if we can get that funding to do more, sort of explore some of the questions that all of you brought. So it's exciting.
And on a final note, I think the beauty of it is also like in Devised theory, we talk about that collaboration between all moving parts. And for us, like this has been like a truly multidisciplinary collaboration and conversation. And that's been like really beautiful as well. And even for me as a theater maker, I just constantly talk to like Maleen about like our stage crew that were the engineers, like what natural stage managers they were, because, of their like the kind of skills and like learning and background they have. They were such natural designers and stage managers and co-creators with us. So that was such a really
shout out to Elaine, Bud, Jan, and all these people who are like engineers. They ran the backstage like a professional backstage. Yeah, costume
managing, makeup, everything.
Okay, well, thank you so much to our three. And thank you to all the performers, including the engineers who have also come along today. Thank you for your work and for sharing your knowledge and ideas with us. Yes.